So I've been wanting to paint water paintings like this for a while now. My absolute favorite water painter of all time is named Irina Cumberland. I've talked about her before because obviously I'm obsessed. But she is just an absolute phenomenal water painter and does these beautiful, beautiful paintings of this transparent, sparkling water where you can see the rocks and the elements underneath the water. And so I've been wanting to figure out how to do that and how to make that happen for a long time, so I decided to finally give it a shot. I don't use an exact reference photo for this painting. It's actually a conglomeration of, I think, 3 or 4 different photos of water, one for the sparkles, one for the surface of the water, one for the rocks. And I just looked at them all while I was putting this painting together. So here I mix up my oil paints. I am working with oil paints for this. I actually do a first layer in acrylics and then move to oil paints, but you'll see that. But first I always like to mix up my oil paints so that I kind of have my colors all set up. And I can tweak them as I move along, but I like to be able to just go into my painting without having to mix up a new color every time I need it. I like to just have it all set up for me so I can go straight into just putting paint on canvas. The basic colors I use to mix up all these blue shades I have here are an ultramarine, any kind of yellow. I used Indian yellow, any kind of red. I used Winsor Red Deep, and we're just using that yellow and red to mute our colors a little bit. And then of course I have a titanium white that I use too. You can see a lot of colors on my palette there. It's just because those are all left over from a previous painting. So the colors I'm mixing up here are all blue. Blue or blue-green. There is not a very broad range of color that we're using here, but I'm still using, you can see me using oranges and reds and stuff to mute the colors down a little bit, but I'm just mixing up a various array of dark blues and light blues, some more green, some less green. I'm making sure to mix up super dark values, middle values, and lighter values so I can have a whole range of colors to make sure that I'm getting enough contrast in my piece as I want. You can see some of those lighter colors have a little more of a green tint to them. I add a little more yellow. And the darker ones, also green, but just slightly more blue. And then I have 2 lighter blue highlight colors that I use as well. So to start this painting, I'm actually painting over an old painting that I never finished and decided that I didn't want to do anymore. I just gave up. I was like, I don't want to make those clouds anymore. I'm not gonna. So what I'm doing here is I'm just dropping some light blue straight on the canvas, and I'm just gonna cover this whole thing up so I have a solid blue color to work on top of. So this is acrylic paint that I'm doing this base layer with. I didn't have to do this, but I really like to have a base color to work on top of before I go into the details of my painting, and I didn't want these little cloud elements that I had on this original piece that I'm painting over to show up underneath my water. So I'm just taking this blue, I'm taking a big brush, and I'm just brushing it all over, covering it all up, and making sure that I have just a nice solid blue foundation. And this is where I actually start to draw out my elements of my painting, and this is still going to be with, it's acrylic paint that I'm doing this base layer with. Then we're going in with acrylics again, and I've mixed up a dark blue. It's very dark, it's just ultramarine, a little bit of yellow. So now I'm actually starting to block in my shapes, still with my acrylic paints. I want to make a layer that dries really fast, that has some of my contrasted values kind of blocked in so I can work on top of them. So here, what I'm doing is I'm looking at a couple of my reference photos and I'm drawing in the shapes of some rocks. So I have these big rock slabs at the front, and then I have some smaller rock slabs at the back. I'm drawing in the super dark shadowed areas first, and then I'm taking a medium value and kind of filling in some more of those medium values, feeling where those spots might be. This is really rough, and this does not have to look perfect by any means. I'm just kind of blocking in where these colors are gonna go in a very, very rough style so that I can work on the perfect little details on the top. I'm also adding in some stripes here. You can see me doing some stripes. That's where the little top of the little waves we're gonna see are where light's hitting it. And I'm even putting in a couple little white spots for where I know some little sparkles are gonna sit. I want to mention that this video is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform with thousands of classes about every creative topic you could possibly think of, including fine arts, music, graphic design, video production, anything. I've been taking a class on Skillshare called Plants at Home with Christopher Griffin, aka Plant Queen, who I love so much. The class is all about how bringing plants into your home and space can uplift your spirit. And I'm learning how not to kill my plants, which is a big deal because I'm not a great plant mama. But I'm working on it. Skillshare constantly has new classes coming out, and there's never any ads. So there's never any distractions from whatever creative direction your mind wants to take you. And when you do an annual subscription, it's less than $10 a month. You can't beat that. The first 1,000 of my subscribers who click the link in the description will get a free trial premium membership so you can explore your creativity. Now we're finally going in with our oil paints. I'm starting at the very bottom of my painting. I don't know why. I usually start at the top of my painting, but I think because the bottom of our painting here is in the foreground and I wanted to work on some of these darker shadows and some of the details that are in the front part of the painting, I started down there. Usually I start at the top so that I'm not constantly putting my wrist in wet paint, but I guess I changed my mind this time around. So I'm starting by filling in my darkest values here and then adding in just kind of the basics for my medium values. Sometimes I like to add in all my dark areas and then all my medium layers and then all my light layers. But for this painting, I kind of started by moving in blocks because it's such an already segmented piece. Like each rock and each shadow is so broken apart, it's really easy and digestible to just start and work on and just tell yourself you're gonna work on this one rock or you're gonna work on this one shadow part. It makes it a lot simpler when you're approaching a really complicated painting like this. So you can see I worked on the bottom below that main big rock and on the rock on the side, filling in just kind of my darkest shadows and then my medium shadows. I'm going to put my highlights on top of all these colors once I get to that. And here you can see me testing out those highlights. After I put down all of my medium colors and my darkest colors, I'm taking a really thin liner brush and a nice light kind of minty kind of color, and I'm streaking it on top of these rocks in ways that are like, this is always the most complicated part to try. When I'm trying to describe how to do the details of a painting, my brain cannot think of words to describe what I'm actually doing. So I just want to add these streaks of light that are shining in from the surface of the water, refracting off the water. Refracting? Is that the word I'm looking for? I don't know. And kind of leaving these beautiful little streaks on top of the rocks. I'm making sure not to add any streaks on our shadowed areas because obviously those are areas where light's not hitting. I just want these streaks to sit on top of the rocks. And then making some circles, some wavy lines, some areas that have bigger chunks of light, areas that have smaller chunks of light. And then I'm also occasionally taking a big flat brush and brushing out the whole painting segment that I've worked on to get this really nice blended look to it. And then I'll add more sharper details on top. But I really like to have this like soft blended look to my painting, especially when I'm doing something that has like curves and gradients on it, like rocks. I like to have that nice and blended. So you can see me doing the exact same process that I did on the rocks on the bottom as I'm doing on this big rock here. making sure all my shadows are in. Then I do my medium tones. And then I'm blocking in those lighter, minty streaks of light. And then I start to block in some of those colors that are in the top part of our painting. And these colors are going to be more simply blocked in because the rocks underneath the water there are more hidden because light is hitting the top of the water in those areas. So the focus of that back part of the painting is going to be the tops of the water and the reflections of the light, and less what is underneath the water, those little rock bits. So with this lighter blue kind of area, I'm starting to streak in the top of the water, the surface of the water where the light is hitting. This is a subtle change. I want it to be a little more drastic in the back and a little softer in the front so we can make sure we're not losing any of those rock details there. But I just want to block in these little streaks that are the tiny little waves that are sitting on top of the water, on top of our rocks. Then I'm adding some more light details around those parts of the light that I know I'm still going to see even through the surface of the water. Just little bits of that mint, little dark areas. I took my mint, I added a little more white and a little bit more yellow, so it's a little bit of a brighter color, and I'm adding more details to the light. Those little light lines that are all over these rocks, just in a few areas. I'm not going overboard on it, but I want to show and highlight some of these extra highlights. Highlight the highlights. Make sure some of these light areas are really popping, areas where light is just really coming in. And I'm adding some of that color too to the streaks on top of the surface of our water. This is where I start to do some more of the details on the streaks. I'm taking some of my light blue and I'm doing some smaller, more fine lines on top of the water here. Little streaks, making sure I'm not going too overboard, but showing that this has a water texture, quote unquote. I don't even know what you'd call it, that it shows that there's an undulating, flowing, wave-like texture to the top of the surface of the water. I'm very slow about this process, doing small streaks very slowly, kind of letting my hand go where I want, kind of loosey-goosey, but still being deliberate about each stroke. I also, with a fairly big brush, I'm blocking in some little bits of light, some highlights where I know the sparkles are going to sit on the water. I give everything a really nice brush out with a soft, dry brush, Just getting those streaks looking really smooth, not so chunky. And then I'm focusing again on those highlight sparkles, taking some light, bluey, minty, greeny kind of colors, not pure white yet at all, and tapping in these little dots where I think the light is going to hit in specific highlighted sparkly areas. Then I take a smaller brush, and I'm taking a lighter white, and I'm tapping in just a little more concentrated points of sparkly light. And with that same brush, I'm tapping in a couple tiny little highlights, specks. Maybe there's tiny little bubbles or foam pits sitting on the surface of the water. Maybe they're just little bits of the water where light is kind of reflecting because the lip of the water has come up a little bit. Just a few. I'm not going overboard with this. Well, I'm trying not to go overboard with this, but I want to add a few more details to these little sparkles here. And then this is where your painting is basically finished. It's all up to you where you want to continue to work, where you want to add more details, where you want to brush out some more areas. This is where the painting is done, but to perfect it and make it to the painting you are totally happy with, you just put in the time, put in the work, take a step back, look at your painting as a whole, see where details are needed, and then make adjustments as you see fit. And that's how I painted this little see-through, water, rocky, beautiful, sparkly seascape? What is this? I don't know. This is how I painted this water painting. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If you want to see the real-time version of this video, it's available for my patrons at patreon.com/EmilyMackeyArt to check that out. Patrons are folks who make voluntary contributions to me on Patreon and get some cool thank you rewards in exchange, including real-time versions of all my videos. So if you're a Patreon subscriber, go check that out. And I'll see you in the next video.